Up in a newscast tonight. South Korea commemorates its 70th Armed Forces Day. The highlights include a speech by President Moon Jae-in, special performances and demonstrations, as well as a ceremony to mark the return of remains of fallen soldiers. U.S. and Canada reach a trade deal that's expected to replace a North American free trade agreement. The new deal could preserve a trilateral bloc with Mexico. More than 800 people are killed after a 7.5 magnitude quake and tsunami struck Indonesia's Sulawesi Island. Over in Japan, Typhoon Trami brings torrential rain, floods, and powerful winds that have already claimed at least 4 lives and injured dozens more. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Cha. President Moon Jae-in attended a special ceremony marking South Korea's 70th Armed Forces Day. He stressed the nation has entered an era of peace, but insisted the military's role has never been more crucial. Hwang Ho-jun has our top story.
President Moon said the nation has entered an era of peace now that the threat of war on the peninsula is gone, recalling the declaration he signed in Pyongyang with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. He reiterated the promise he made in front of 150,000 Pyongyang citizens to realize a peninsula without nuclear weapons or nuclear threats. But President Moon emphasized that peace doesn't come overnight, and that it can only be achieved when South Korea is powerful enough to fend for itself.
이제 우리 군이 한반도 평화의 맨 앞자리에 서야 할 때입니다. 힘을 통한 평화는 군의 사명이며 평화 시대의 진정한 주인공은 바로 강한 군대입니다.
President Moon's remarks came during a ceremony to celebrate South Korea's 70th Armed Forces Day. His speech follows his recent summit in Pyongyang with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, where the two Koreas signed a joint military agreement to immediately halt all hostile military acts against one another. During Monday's ceremony, President Moon first congratulated and thanked all active service members and war veterans for their sacrifices. Noting the military reform that is taking place, President Moon once again stressed that the process is necessary so that the armed forces can be one with the people. He also stressed that key to a strong military is the soldiers themselves.
국민과 함께하는 군대가 가장 강한 군대이며 강한 군을 만드는 핵심은 장병들입니다. 장병들이 차별 없이 존중받고 진정으로 국가와 군을 자랑스러워할 때 용기와 헌신을 갖춘 군인이 될 것입니다.
President Moon pledged to make the service environment fairer and more communicative, while also providing customized support for service members to find jobs to ensure that their military obligation does not cause them to be severed from society. He also vowed to expand opportunities for discharged soldiers to become police officers, coast guards, and firemen, as well as tackling gender discrimination within the military. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
Each soldier's service and sacrifice were remembered today. The main event took place this evening in Seoul at the War Memorial of Korea. Kan Young-woo brings us the highlights.
This year's Armed Forces Day event began with a ceremonial performance by a guard of honor and traditional music from a military band. Held at night for the first time, this year's ceremony was carried live by a number of national broadcasters. Seoul's top office had decided that more people would be able to watch the event in the evening and appreciate the service of South Korea's military. After soldiers put on a taekwondo performance to multiple rounds of applause, the military displayed its future combat systems, such as the Army's Warrior platform and the drone boats and unmanned battle machines of the Navy and Air Force. To audience delight, South Korea's famous aerobatic team, the Black Eagles, also put on a special air show. In order to minimize the participation of active duty service members, whose preparation would have taken months, the government invited world-famous K-pop star, Gangnam Style's very own Psy. South Korea's defense ministry did not show off its military arsenal with a large parade for the 70th Armed Forces Day. Instead, this year's ceremony was more in line with the current peace-building atmosphere on the Korean peninsula. Kang-young-woo, Arirang News.
Also on this very special day, President Moon Jae-in invited more than 200 veterans and military officials to Cheongwade for a celebratory luncheon. During the gathering, he called for a stronger military to ensure lasting peace on the peninsula.
그 어느 때보다 튼튼한 국방이 중요합니다. 우리가 힘이 있고 우리를 지킬 수 있는 자신감이 있을 때 평화가 지속될 수 있습니다.
With the top commanders of U.S. Forces Korea also in attendance, President Moon stressed the importance of Seoul-Washington alliance. He added the strength of the armed forces comes from the trust of the people and called for complete military reform. The remains of 64 South Korean soldiers killed during the war that divided a nation in two were returned to their homeland in time for the 70th Armed Forces Day celebrations. According to our Park Ki-jun, the process was very complicated, requiring Seoul and Washington to conduct joint identification tests 3 times.
South Korea held a repatriation ceremony for the remains of 64 soldiers who died during the Korean War nearly 70 years ago. It was attended by President Moon Jae-in, who paid individual tribute before each basket of remains and awarded them with Korean War medals. He was joined by 60 other people, including Chung Kyung-do, the nation's defense minister, Vincent Brooks, the head of the United Nations Command, and Korean War veterans. The remains were excavated through joint operations by North Korea and the U.S. between 1996 and 2005 in the North Hamgyeongnam-do and Pyeongnam-do provinces. Believed to be troops who fought alongside U.S. forces, they were transferred to the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency in Hawaii for identification. Through joint identification tests conducted by South Korea and the U.S. 3 times in 2011, 2015, and 2018, it was verified that the remains were those of South Korean troops who fought during the Korean War. A repatriation ceremony for the war dead was held in Hawaii, where South Korea's Vice Defense Minister Seo Ju-seok accepted the remains from the DPAA. The 64 sets of bodies were then finally returned home on Sunday. After respects were paid to the fallen war heroes at the ceremony, the remains were sent to the Defense Ministry's Agency for Killed in Action Recovery and Identification. It will try to identify the individuals so that they can once again be reunited with their families. Park Ki-jun, Arirang News.
Starting today, South and North Korea will begin removing mines from the demilitarized zone and from the joint security area in Panmunjom. It's part of implementing the military agreement signed at the recent Inter-Korean summit in Pyongyang. Both sides will be carrying out the process through October 20th. During that time, officials will, including those from UN Command, will discuss new operational rules for soldiers working in the JSA after it's demilitarized. The two Koreas will also be removing mines from the Arrowhead Plateau so that they can work on discovering the remains of soldiers killed during the Korean War. That operation will run through November 30th. The two sides will also discuss the possibility of tourists and visitors being allowed to visit both sides of the JSA. Our Defense Ministry correspondent got a rare opportunity to hop on board a fighter jet. She went through the grueling preparations, then took flight in a state-of-the-art machine. Park Ji-won gets us better acquainted with the FA-50.
Anyone hoping to train in the air as a fighter pilot has to start with physiological training on the ground. Every Korean fighter pilot goes through this training every 3 years. One of the main things is the G-force test, which trains pilots to endure extreme gravity. Pilots need to be able to withstand up to 9 Gs, or 9 times gravity's normal strength. Under G-forces that strong, if you haven't learned the special breathing methods, you will pass out instantly as gravity drains blood out of the brain, causing hypoxia. There's also training for low air pressure, something pilots experience way up in the sky. The chamber simulates the conditions found at an altitude of 25,000 feet, or nearly 8,000 meters. Without an oxygen mask, your oxygen levels will fall dangerously in less than 3 minutes. You can go up in a fighter jet only once you pass the training. You will still need a safety and mission briefing beforehand though, and you have to put on a G-suit, which helps with the extreme gravity. I took a ride in South Korea's first supersonic combat fighter developed by Korea Aerospace Industries in conjunction with the U.S. firm Lockheed Martin. This is DFA-50 and I've been given the chance to fly in it and experience all of those specs myself. I got in the backseat and put on the helmet and oxygen mask. The pilot flew us at an average speed of over 800 kilometers per hour, but its maximum speed is Mach 1.5, or more than double that. He did a series of training maneuvers for surface attacks and air combat. The pilot took us shooting straight up, drove the plane way down, and careened into tight angle turns at an altitude as low as 500 feet and as high as 40,000. Air Force Major Cho Ji-soo, a veteran fighter pilot with over 2,000 flight hours over the past 15 years, acknowledges the South Korean jet's excellent capabilities.
It's a great honor to operate the first fighter aircraft developed using South Korean technology. The more flight hours I put in, the prouder I become as I experience more of the aircraft's excellent performance.
South Korea has exported dozens of the most advanced variant of the T-50 family along with other models, making Korea only the world's sixth exporter of supersonic aircraft.
Some 360 aircraft from the FA-50 family are in operation both in and outside of the country. The model's consistently safe record has built confidence in South Korean fighter aircraft.
With these homegrown state-of-the-art fighter jets, South Korean pilots get training on an almost daily basis for an average of about 15 to 25 flight hours a month. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, the National Assembly interpellation session continues with government ministers in the hot seat. Some issues for debate were the outcome of the recent Inter-Korean summit and the ratification of a joint summit declaration. Kim Min-ji has the latest from Parliament.
The main opposition Liberty Korea party said that not enough progress has been made on denuclearization, despite 3 rounds of talks between President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
North Korea needs to submit a list of its nuclear weapons. Also, how will the international community oversee the dismantlement? Have either of these things been taken care of?
The United States supports South Korea in fostering an environment for peace. You must note that we are not the sole player, but we've been able to restart talks between North Korea and the U.S.
The ruling Democratic Party of Korea, however, said that the South Korean government is doing a good job as a mediator and that now the U.S. needs to act boldly so that the North can take concrete steps, as promised in the Pyongyang Declaration.
There needs to be action so that the North can feel secure as it denuclearizes.
What the North has demanded is a guarantee of its regime's security. This has to be given in line with denuclearization, but it can't be right now because of a lack of trust between Washington and Pyongyang. So they will need to discuss what corresponding actions the U.S. can take so the North can take concrete measures.
On the ratification of the Panmunjom Declaration agreed on by the two Koreas in April, the conservatives said that progress on denuclearization must come first. They also criticized the government for its vagueness about the price tag, claiming that some infrastructure projects the government wants would cost roughly $50 billion.
You don't know, or this information is uncomfortable for you to discuss?
We have to conduct joint investigations and decide what to do first before we can come up with an exact figure. So the estimate that we have put forward is what we believe we will need for next year.
But the ruling party stressed that the declaration needs to be ratified by Parliament to ensure the promises in it are implemented, even if there's a change in government.
What are you doing in terms of ratification?
We'll closely communicate and seek cooperation from Parliament. But please note that there are ways South Korea will benefit as the projects are carried out.
As for the agreement signed last month on easing military tensions, the opposition argued that South Korea's military has been weakened, but the ruling party and the government brushed off those concerns, saying that the agreement has reduced the chances of clashes and has not compromised the country's security. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
After fierce negotiations, the U.S. and Canada concluded a trade deal that could potentially preserve a trilateral bloc with Mexico. It's also expected to replace the North American Free Trade Agreement. Kim Ji-yeon gets us up to speed with the developments.
The U.S. and Canada have reached a new trade deal known as the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or the USMCA, which follows a separate agreement between the U.S. and Mexico reached in August. The two new deals are designed to pave the way for a full overhaul of the 25-year-old North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, that governs more than $1 trillion in annual trade among the three countries. In a joint statement, the U.S. and Canada stated that the USMCA would result in freer markets, fairer trade, and will give workers, farmers, ranchers, and businesses a high-standard trade agreement and robust economic growth in the region. It'll strengthen the middle class and create good, well-paying jobs, as well as open new opportunities for the nearly 500 million people who call North America home. Under the new deal, Canada agreed to raise quotas on U.S. dairy imports, but says it'll continue imposing severe tariffs that exceeds the quota. An extrajudicial trade dispute system called Chapter 19 under the NAFTA deal that covers alleged unfair trade practices is to be preserved in the new deal, pursuant to aspirations of Canadian negotiators. Regarding the auto industry, Canada agreed to cap auto exports to the U.S., while the U.S. gave assurances that Canada will not be subject to national security tariffs the Trump administration had threatened to impose on imported steel and aluminum that could be extended to Canadian-made automobiles. The new trade pact is to come up for review by the parties every 6 years to make sure the arrangement is effectively being enforced and to provide updates on intellectual property treatment. The leaders of the three North American countries are scheduled to sign the USMCA before the end of November. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Following the signing of the revised bilateral free trade agreement with the U.S. last week, Korea's trade minister on Monday addressed some of the uncertainties regarding trade. On the possible imposition of U.S. tariffs on imported steel and aluminum, as well as automobiles, Kim Yeon-jung highlighted that the ministry is aiming to gain assurances from the U.S. to exempt Korea from the measure. He explained the ministry is closely monitoring U.S. negotiation process with Japan, Canada, the European Union, as he sees the outcomes impacting the timing and severity of the tariff measures. Kim adds the ministry is to submit the revised KORUS FTA to the National Assembly by Tuesday to initiate the ratification process. South Korea's Trade Ministry released its preliminary data on exports and imports for September. For the fifth month in a row, outbound shipments topped $50 billion. Kim Hae-sung helped us break down the digits.
Korea recorded $50.6 billion of exports in September, passing the $50 billion mark for the fifth consecutive month. On year, the figure is down 8.2%, falling by the sharpest margin in over 2 years. But the decline is likely due to fewer working days.
There were 4 fewer working days in September due to the Chuseok holiday, resulting in a fall of around $8 billion. But average exports per working day jumped 10.6% on year, recording $2.59 billion, the highest on record.
These strong export figures came on the back of robust semiconductor exports, which increased more than 28% on year last month to record $12.4 billion. Petroleum goods exports also expanded by double digits on strong demand and rising oil prices. But Korea's other major exports, including autos, machinery, and ships, all fell.
Exports of ships fell as the cyclical global shipping industry remained sluggish. Auto exports dropped this month mainly due to shorter working days. Diversifying exports, especially lowering Korea's reliance on semiconductors, will be key in the long run. But overall, Korea's exports remain pretty strong on recovering global trade this year.
Imports dropped 2.1% to around $41 billion, leading to a trade surplus of $9.7 billion last month, the 80th consecutive month of surplus. Between January and September, Korea's exports hit a record high total of $450 billion, up 4.7% on year. But the Trade Ministry pointed to the escalating U.S.-China trade spat, the U.S. rate hike, and slowing emerging market growth as downside risks, and vowed to secure auto tariff exemptions from the Trump administration as well as diversify Korea's exports. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
The 2018 Nobel Prize for Medicine has been jointly awarded to James Allison of the University of Texas and Tasuku Honjo of Japan's Kyoto University for discovering a cancer therapy that involves our immune system to attack tumors. They are the first Nobel Prize recipients of the year, as medicine or physiology is the first of 5 categories to be given out this week. However, there will be no laureates for literature this year, as key figures involved in the nomination and selection of winners are involved in a Me Too scandal. The Swedish Academy, the literature prize awarding body, said in May that it will push back on naming this year's award winner to reform the institution. Without the literature award, the next most anticipated winner announcement this year would be that of the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, to be announced in Oslo on Friday. The death toll from last Friday's earthquake and tsunami in Indonesia has risen past 840. Meanwhile, over in Japan, a powerful storm has killed at least 2 and injured more than 130 people. Cho Sung-min brings us the updates.
The Indonesian authorities said Monday that the death toll from the magnitude 7.5 quake and a 3-meter high tsunami that occurred 3 days ago on Sulawesi Island has climbed to 844. They said they have started burying the dead in mass graves to prevent the spread of disease. A search continues for survivors believed to be buried under collapsed buildings. The Indonesian Disaster Management Agency said around 2.4 million people were affected by last week's disaster, including some 600 people who were taken to hospital. Aid for the survivors are on the way from around the world, with the European Union having offered $1.7 million. The Australian government has also reportedly reached out to the Indonesian government to offer help. Meanwhile, a powerful typhoon swept over eastern Japan on Sunday, hitting the city of Osaka. Sources there say 2 people are confirmed dead, 2 are missing, and at least 130 were injured. NHK says the storm's maximum wind speed of 216 kilometers per hour is the strongest since 1991, when wind speed was first measured. The storm caused major disruptions at airports and train stations on Monday. More than 230 flights were canceled at Kansai International Airport. Cho Sung-min, Arirang News.
Seoul's government is planning to provide much-needed financial aid to quake-hit Indonesia. Meanwhile, the Foreign Ministry announced there are several South Koreans reported missing in Palu. For details, let's turn to our Hong Yu.
Buildings reduced to rubble and dead bodies lined up in the streets. Rescue efforts are still underway in Palu, Indonesia, after it was hit with a 7.5 magnitude earthquake and the following tsunami last Friday. To help with the recovery process, the South Korean government is providing $1 million to Indonesia as humanitarian assistance. The assistance will help with urgent humanitarian needs and help the country recover from the disaster. And if more help is needed, the South Korean Foreign Ministry is also considering offering to send emergency relief troops after consulting with the Indonesian government. Many people are still trapped under rubble, hoping to be rescued. Possibly among them is a South Korean man who was staying in this hotel in Palu before it collapsed. When the earthquake hit Indonesia's Sulawesi Island, the mother of the missing South Korean lost contact with her son. Today, 4 days after the quake struck, she will visit the scene to look for him. According to the South Korean embassy in Indonesia, the consular representative departed for Palu at 7 a.m. local time, and the family along with 1 employee from the embassy at 10 a.m.
I still don't have any idea of what I should do, whether I should go there and dig the ground or at least hand out water to the rescue team.
The South Korean Foreign Ministry said there are 7 more South Koreans reported as out of touch since the disaster. The consular representative sent to Palu is checking specific facts and trying to track down those reported missing. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, the first day in October has certainly set a clear difference from previous months with much cooler readings.
That's right, Daniel. In Seoul, the daytime high didn't even top 20 degrees Celsius today. But tomorrow, our day should be warmer than today due to the clear and sunny conditions. Now, meanwhile, Beijing and Tokyo will remain warmer than Korea. We should have another typhoon named Kongray, meaning mountain in Cambodian, approaching this weekend. And at this point, Kongray doesn't seem to present a direct threat to the Korean peninsula, but it's way too early to reach any conclusions. And tomorrow morning, temperatures are expected to fall even further than today. Seoul begins the morning at 11 degrees Celsius. Chuncheon over in Gangwon province wakes up to a single-digit reading. And our daytime highs are still hovering around the 20s. Seoul hitting up to 22 degrees Celsius. Busan and Jeju only a degree higher at 23 degrees. The capital will enjoy mostly clear skies this week, but those of you over in Jeju should have your umbrellas ready over on Friday through Saturday. And as for the readings, temperatures will return to seasonal average levels starting Wednesday. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we could squeeze into tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thanks for staying with us.